This massive creature is said to be twice the size of an elephant.
They talk about an animal between 30 to 70 feet in length with
long, thin neck, bulbous body, and the heavy tail, the elephant-like legs.
An animal thought to have been extinct for centuries.
In fact, I think I'd feel safer in Jurassic Park.
Now, Monster Quest travels to the wildest continent to search for the last living dinosaur.
Whoa.
It's all up and down like this. Look at that. What? Wow, what is that?
And there are these footprints, huge footprints.
Witnesses around the world report seeing monsters. Are they real or imaginary? Science searches for answers on Monster Quest. Africa, the cradle of mankind. This continent contains some of the world's most magnificent wildlife, from the gorilla and elephant to giraffe and gazelle. Among this vast wilderness, much of it unexplored, some believe there could be a monster that is a living relic, hidden deep in the jungle. This huge creature is said to prowl the land and lurk beneath inland waters. Natives call it Mokele Mbembe, one that stops the flow of rivers.
Heavy armored sides, scales, a fringe of scales down the back.
Footprints of the order of 3 feet in circumference.
He always came out of the cave to find food.
The people call this animal Mokele Mbembe.
You've heard of the Loch Ness Monster and the legendary North American Bigfoot. Now meet Mokele Mbembe, Africa's very own mythical monster. The ancient creature that's been making a splash worldwide since...
Literally blocker of rivers, thought by some scientists to fit the description of a plesiosaur, a prehistoric marine reptile that died out with the dinosaurs. Although dismissed by many as scientific...
Originally reported by missionaries more than 100 years ago, sightings of this legendary beast have risen over the last few years as extensive deforestation thins out the once impenetrable jungle.
Many of the early accounts of the flora and fauna of West and Central Africa came from missionaries and explorers. In 1776, the Abbé Levain Bonaventure Proyar wrote in the history of Luango, Kakonga, and other kingdoms in Africa about a group of French missionaries who had found the tracks of an enormous unknown animal in the jungle. Pinkerton's translation, published in 1914, reads, "It must be monstrous. The prints of its claws are seen upon the earth and formed an impression on it of about 3 feet in circumference. In observing the posture and disposition of the footprints, they concluded that it did not run this part of the way and that it carried its claws at a distance of 7 or 8 feet, one from the other." Prints this large could only have been made by an animal the size of an elephant, but elephants do not possess clawed toes. What kind of monster was it? New clues were to come as more reports began to emerge from Africa about this mystery monster.
There wasn't very much more discussion about giant lizards or monsters in the Congo until about the early 20th century. But very early in the 20th century, some respected explorers and researchers did start discussing the possibility.
Hagenbeck, who was director of the Hamburg Zoo, has been acclaimed as one of the greatest animal collectors of all time. In his book, Beasts and Men, published in 1912, he wrote, "On the walls of certain caverns in Central Africa there are to be found actual drawings of this strange creature. From what I have heard of the animal, it seems to me that it can only be some kind of dinosaur, seemingly akin to the Brontosaurus. As the stories come from so many different sources, and all tend to substantiate each other, I am almost convinced that some such reptile must still be in existence." In 1913, the German government decided to survey its then colony of Cameroon and chose Captain Friar von Stein-Zulausnitz to lead the expedition. Von Stein included the following fascinating report on a creature, quote, very much feared by the Negroes of certain parts of the territory of the Congo, the Lower Ubangi, the Sanga, and the Ikalemba rivers. They called the animal Mokele Mbembe. The animal is said to be of a brownish grape color, its size approximating that of an elephant. It is said to have a long and very flexible neck. Some spoke of a long, muscular tail like that of an alligator. Canoes coming near it are said to be doomed. The animals are said to attack the vessels at once and to kill the crews, but without eating the bodies. The creature is said to live in the caves that have been washed out by the river, in the clay of its shores at sharp bends. It is said to climb the shore even in daytime in search of its food. Its diet is said to be entirely vegetable.
One of the most interesting books, though not written by a very reputable author, is The Trader Horn.
He wrote a book called Trader Horn, a young man's astounding adventures in 19th century equatorial Africa, detailing his journeys into jungles teeming with buffalo, gorillas, man-eating leopards, serpents, and headhunters. Aye, and behind the Cameroons there's things living we know nothing about. I could have made books about many things. The Jaganini, they say, is still in the swamps and rivers. Giant diver, it means. Comes out of the water and devours people. Old men will tell you what their grandfathers saw, but they still believe it's there. Same as the Amali, I've always taken it to be. I've seen the Amali's footprint, about the size of a good frying pan in circumference and 3 claws instead of 5.
There's been something here that I wanted to show you. This is a book, The Trader Horn, written by, well, the name on the book is Alfred Aloysius Horn. But in fact, he was born Aloysius Smith. He was thrown out of boarding school, ran away to Africa to trade ivory. And that's what he did. This was in the late 19th century, and he had wonderful adventures with gorillas and elephants and buffalo. But his most interesting adventure was in liberating an Isorga princess. Actually, she was a white girl and sort of a white goddess, if you want to use that term. And if you're familiar with the ancient Roman custom of Vestal virgins, that's kind of what she was, and she wanted to get away. In liberating her, he also took an eye of an idol, which was a diamond, and stole that as well. At the time that he was discovered, Horn was basically on welfare in South Africa, although he had had a fascinating life, even meeting Cecil Rhodes, and he enjoyed telling people those stories. Now, this book takes place in West Africa. But in 1931, 4 years after this book came out, they came out with a movie, The Trader Horn. The Trader Horn movie takes place in East Africa. He comes up through Kenya up into Uganda, but otherwise the storyline about the Isorga princess is pretty similar. The movie The Trader Horn was the first full-length movie that was shot in Africa that was not a documentary. And it was also a talkie, so it has sound with it. And you probably have already recognized the title music. It's the Cannibals Carnival, and it's the same title music that Johnny Weissmuller used in the Tarzan pictures. Now, that's not an accident. The outtakes from Trader Horn are continually used in the Johnny Weissmuller series. Trader Horn is played by Harry Carey. The white goddess is played by Edwina Booth. That's not her actual name. Edwin Booth was her favorite uncle, so she used that as her stage name. And Duncan Ronaldo is the romantic lead. She was hot stuff in her days, and this is a pre-code movie, and so it's relatively risque. Edwina was said not to only be hot stuff on screen, but off screen as well, and she is said to have had a torrid love affair with Duncan Ronaldo just off the set. As a matter of fact, Duncan's wife sued her later for alienation of affection. In the lower right, Harry Carey does actually become perilously close to losing a foot to a crocodile. And in this entire movie, Edwina does not speak a single word of English, although she does come down with a disease that ends her career, probably malaria. This may not look like an auspicious beginning for their relationship, but Edwina does eventually help them to escape, and she goes with them. In the end, Ranchero, played by Mutia, sacrifices himself to save his friends. Now, the interesting thing is that if you listen to the Tarzan movies, the Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan movies closely, you'll see that Tarzan is on the Mutia escarpment. The escarpment is named after this actor. Now, there is one other thing in the movie that you probably wouldn't expect, and that is there was someone killed in the movie by a charging rhinoceros, and that footage is included in the movie. So where you see the rhinoceros killing a person, that happens to be a real event, although they have made it so that it looks like perhaps it's not. Now, getting back to the book from the movie, this is something that's actually in Trader Horn's book. It's a hand-drawn map of places that he was. And one of the things that you can see is that Brazzaville is pretty squarely on the map. That means that he was mostly in the Republic of the Congo more than he was the Cameroons. After Trader Horn, many people told Mokele and Mbembe stories, but maybe one of the best ones was told by Pastor Eugene Thomas. Around 1960, 59 or 60, down in the Lake Tele region, there were some tribesmen fishing, pygmies fishing, and they were being disturbed by Mokele and Mbembes. And so in order to keep the animals at bay, they put some stakes into the river that the Mokele and Mbembes used to enter the lake. And one day, one of the animals trying to get through impaled itself on the stake barrier, and the natives killed it, speared it to death, and ate it. All of the natives subsequently died who ate the Mokele and Mbembe. In 1980, Arthur C. Clarke picked up the story and broadcast it on one of his episodes.
The animal is described as being as big as an elephant, or at least as big as a hippopotamus. It has a long head and neck and a long tail. It has feet that are like a hippopotamus, but it has 3 claws on each of these feet. Every kind of animal that we can think of that is alive today doesn't fit this picture. The closest it comes to, and amazing as this may seem, is a dinosaur that is extinct perhaps 65 to 70 million years.
It does have an almost perfect resemblance to certain types of dinosaurs, particularly the 3-clawed footprint. That's almost the trademark of certain long-necked dinosaurs. What really got me onto this was in 1976, I had a grant from the Explorers Club of New York to study rainforest crocodiles in the Gabon, which is a country immediately to the west of Congo. And since I had read about these reports, I decided to see if I could come across any similar information. So among the Fang tribesmen, I tried a little, you might say, flashcard test. I first of all showed them pictures of 5 animals which are reasonably common in the Gabon jungles. And in each case I would say, can you recognize this animal? What is it? He says, sure, of course, that's an elephant, that's a gorilla, that's a leopard, etc. These things live around here in the jungle. We know them. Then just as a control test, I showed him a picture of a bear. Now, there are no bear in Africa, so far as we know. And I said, do you know that animal? He said, no, we've never seen this. That animal not live around here. Then, just matter-of-factly, I showed him this. It's a picture of a diplodocus from a children's book on dinosaurs. I said, do you know that animal? And in several different villages, representing at least 2 different cultural groups, I would get consistent answers. Yes, that's the Nyamala. We know that animal. It lives back in the deep lakes, deep in the jungles.
In the early 1980s, Mokele made 2 expeditions to Africa. He was able to collect enough eyewitness testimony to convince him a dinosaur-like creature still lived in the jungle.
What impressed me was that the descriptions matched. That is an animal of the order of 25 to 30 feet, 8, 9, 10 meters in length, reddish in color, with a frill on the back of the neck, a long head neck that looked snake-like.
Mokele described the animal as reptilian.
They described them as being able to submerge as a crocodile would, but they did come out on land most of the time. There just isn't anything like it at all.
Now, subsequent to the Mokele expedition, there were a number of other expeditions that occurred, mostly in the 1980s. There was a British one, a Dutch, and Japanese. There were a flurry of books written, but there were no good photos, no good video, no good hard physical evidence that there was any kind of a dinosaur in the Congo. Now, one thing that did turn up that was kind of interesting is that some pygmies apparently identify Mokele and Mbembe with a rhinoceros. Now, there had been rhinoceros in this area before, but for as far as we can tell, there are no rhinoceros in this neighborhood these days. The rhino footprint does have 3 toes, but it's much smaller than the Mokele Mbembe footprint. About a decade ago, there were a number of TV shows that specialized in monsters, and several of them did go after Mokele and Mbembe, including Monster Quest, Beast Hunter, and Destination Truth with Josh Gates. Now, what do we know about Mokele and Mbembe? Well, the stories are that he's some sort of a reptile, probably a dinosaur. It looks an awful lot like a sauropod, but he spends a great deal of time in the water. There are some drawings of him, and there are a lot of stories, but there's virtually no physical evidence. The animal is supposed to be a vegetarian, but it can be very vicious. Has a tendency to kill hippopotamus that are in the area, and it overturns canoes. Now, as dinosaurs go, Mokele and Mbembe isn't very large. This is a pygmy next to Mokele and Mbembe, and you can see they're both quite small. Mokele and Mbembe is often found on land, and he likes to graze on vines, especially flowering vines, at various times of the year. In fact, it seems to be his major source of food. And we also know that the animal is in the Republic of the Congo and neighboring areas. In fact, the hotspot appears to be Lake Tele. Now, Lake Tele is one of those places that's extremely difficult to get to, but it's not terribly far from where we are. Lake Tele is just a little bit to the east of the three lodges where we're staying. Now, one of the most compelling proofs that Mokele Mbembe exists is the fact that you can find him in the Tarzan cartoon strip. Obviously, it wouldn't have been put in print if he didn't exist. So it's time now for us to go out looking for Mokele Mbembe in his natural habitat.